a good friend of mine, Chris Lamb, who's one of my closest friends and the head coach of Wichita State, he would always say there's two kind of players who tip, really bad ones and All-Americans.
Hey guys, welcome back. Adam Ellis here, club director at NPJ. Today I'm joined with the head coach of University of Arizona women's volleyball team, Dave Rubio. Dave, thanks for taking the time to join us today, buddy.
It's great to be here with you, Adam. And I do actually have an Arizona shirt on. I can't tell if you can see that, but I am representing University of Arizona, and it's great to be here with you.
Bear down.
Yep.
Hey, so we know you've got a little history on the golf course. Tell us about your most recent hole-in-one. I want a little play-by-play.
Well, as you know, I've been hosting an annual golf tournament in June, the beginning of June, for close to 25 years, and we've always carried over a hole-in-one type of pot. Everyone chips in about, I think, $10 every year in the event that someone makes a hole-in-one, and it carried over. And anyway, I was a beneficiary of that. It was the first hole-in-one, and I think in those 26 years, I was on the last day. I was the leader actually going into the last day on the very first hole. On my very first swing, I was on a par 3. I was fortunate that I didn't see it actually go in. I hit the ball, and someone yelled that I think that's in the hole, and we drove up there, and by God, it was inside. I was looking around to see if it was rolled in the trap or it was down in the dirt somewhere, but one of the guys went in and checked and saw that it was in the hole. So it was probably once in a lifetime type of deal. But the best part was I got all that money from all the years of people chipping in to get the hole-in-one. So it was great.
Yeah, well, it was paid off for sure, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, so with everything happening with COVID-19, do you think we will see an increase or decrease in the skill level of volleyball and athletes across the board?
Well, I certainly think that it would be difficult for people to increase or to fine tune and polish up their skills during this time, and where nobody's inside the gym. There might be some kids and some players who are playing outdoors, but for the indoor kids, this has really been a difficult time for us because we just haven't had a chance to train and to really work on technique and fundamentals. And so I think that when we come back, it may be a little bit rough. I think it's going to be tough to get, our legs underneath us. And I think just the strength and conditioning side of it's going to be hard. We're kind of used to being in the gym for hours on hours. And I think just the body builds up a resistance to that. And I think it's just going to take us time before we can kind of get ourselves to the point where we can even do a 2.5 hour, 3 hour practice. And I think that's going to be really important for the college teams anyway. Once we get back in the gym, kind of how to moderate how much time we're going to spend in the practice gym.
Do you think that, because of this, break, because of the pandemic, do you think that the level of just competitiveness when you get into match play will increase because kids aren't taking things for granted anymore?
That's a good question. That's will be interesting to see, how it affects the kids' attitude, the players' attitudes, and you tend to take things for granted anytime it's, you do something in routine and something like what we've been doing. And now I think for all the players and all the collegiate players, all the club players, understand how important the sport is, or maybe it isn't for some. You kind of come to, a decision. It's like, well, maybe I don't like it as much as I thought I did. I don't miss the sport as much as I thought I would miss it. For some, it may be the other way. Maybe, man, I just can't wait to get back in the gym, and I really miss, the opportunity to be with my teammates and to be trained and to be pushed and to work hard. And so, you get a little bit more self-reflection during that time. Certainly for me, that's been the case. And so, I'm hoping that there's a real positive effect once they come back because of being out of the gym for so long.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see that as well. Hey, how would you describe the culture in your gym and also your coaching style?
Well, I think the culture, you're constantly working on the culture of your team. And you set standards in the gym, and the key to standards is that the players understand what the standards are and they buy into the standards, and they're willing to be held accountable to those standards. And now whether it's physical standards, whether it's work ethic standards, whether it's behavior standards. I think all those things are communicated through the coaching staff and certainly directed by the head coach, down to the players, down to the team captain, and down to the players for the 16th, 17th player on your team. And they all have to buy into that. And then the key is that if they fall below that line, if they fall below that standard, that they understand that there is accountability. And then with accountability, there may be consequence. And there's, however that consequence looks. And I think for me, that's the key part is the accountability of it. And the consequence doesn't have to be severe by any means, but they need to know that they're going to be held accountable. And I think that the culture is dictated by that, in terms of, how hard you want to work. And for us, the work ethic is a big part for me, is a big part of it. The willing to be coached is a big part of it, and understand that the information, the feedback is not a criticism of them as a person, and that they have a growth mindset, and that they understand that it takes time to get better. And so that part has really been important for me in terms of developing the culture. And a lot of that is just a buy-in by the players. And the key is, for me, is that the players will buy in more, is the more that they trust me. And the trust between the head coach and the players is such a critical component of my ability to get the most out of the player. And so that's an ongoing, never-ending, 24/7 process of me trying to establish a relationship with each of my players. And that's hard because it's, 16, 17 of them and one of me. But that's part of the key for me, is being able to establish that relationship with them, and so that I can push them and I can challenge them, and they're willing to be challenged and be pushed without taking it personally. And so that part has been a real critical component for me. And as I've gotten older, I feel I've gotten better with that. And especially in today's culture, where players, Generation Z, want to have more of a voice. They want to have, they want to be part of the conversation when you're talking about training and culture standards. So those things are really important. I certainly have had to change my style and some of my philosophy of training because of the type of kids that are coming through the system now.
Run us through what a typical practice looks like for the Wildcats.
Well, the premise is always going to be from a teaching side. And so we'll come in the gym and we'll spend probably the first 20 to 30 minutes of the beginning part of the warm-up, of just trying to get the core warmed up, and a total core warm-up. And we'll do that by a couple different ways. And some of that's playing, some of that's just, a typical warm-up, running around and stretching. But after about 10 to 15 minutes of that, then we'll go right into position training. So we'll do about 30 minutes a day, at least, of position training. And so we'll have 4 coaches in the gym. And so each one will have their own position. And then we'll really get after the position training. And then after we do about, 30 to 40 minutes of position training, then it's right into some type of systems. So depending on what that might be, we'll do some form of sixes. We'll come back, we'll split up, and then we'll go into serving and passing. We'll spend about 30, 40 minutes in serving and passing. That may be a combination of passing to attacking, including the blocking. And then we'll finish off the practice, a 2.5-hour practice, by some form of competition. So that's pretty routine for us. And you know, I kind of have to think hard about it because it's been so long since I've been in the gym. But after 28 years, 29 years now, I think I could probably step in the gym and handle that.
So, Dave, talking to, numerous different collegiate coaches, both in the Pac-12 and outside the Pac-12, they all have high remarks for all of your outside hitters. And when there's, something that defines the Arizona program, everyone talks about how elite your outside hitters are. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? And then also, what are the 5 shots you think are most valuable for your outside hitters?
Well, I've never really felt like we've had elite outside hitters. That's certainly not a knock on our kids. I mean, the one that came in the door that was exceptional was Kim Glass. And she, went on to become the starting outside hitter for the silver medal team. So she came in the door, was exceptional. I think all the outside hitters from then, we really had to build from the ground up. And each of them are a different skill set. The outside hitting position in general for you talk to any coach, club, or, all the way up to the college coach, the national team, it's really the most difficult position to train because of all the skill sets that they have to have in order to be able to function at such a high level. And so when we bring in an outside hitter, they're going to be good, particularly in one skill, and maybe not so good in another. So, for example, they may be really good as a passer, but not terminal enough at the net, when they're attacking, and vice versa. Typically, you can get kids who jump high enough and hit hard enough to score, but they're not skilled enough to play the back row and the service receive and play defense. And the key is the building blocks that you start with them when they come in as freshmen, and you build on those blocks. And in my opinion, when you recruit players with the idea of what they're going to look like 4 years from now, 4 years during the training period, so what their finished product is going to be, and know it's going to take time to get them there. Depending on your recruiting cycle, sometimes you need to get a player like your former player, Paige Whipple, who we knew that when we recruited her that she was going to have to come in and start as a freshman, which is such a tall order for any freshman in our conference, is to be able to handle the physical, the skills, and the mental part of being able to compete in the Pac-12 as a freshman. That's such a brutal, long, arduous road to be able to do that and be successful. But the outside hitting certainly has been a key component for our training, because we're not getting super physical kids, super skills kids. We're really having to build those kids throughout their 4 years at Arizona. So in terms of the 5 shots, I think every great outside hitter, all right, has got to be able to learn how to hit cross court hard, 4-to-4. They got to be able to learn, have a line shot. All right. They got to know how to hit high off the top. All right. And then they got to have an open hand tip shot. They got to have to be able to tip. And then they got to be able to roll shot too. And so in my mind, a good friend of mine, Chris Lamb, who's one of my closest friends and the head coach of Wichita State, he would always say there's 2 kind of players who tip: really bad ones and All-Americans. And so and I've always carried that in the gym, because off-speed shots are just as effective as any kid who can really get up and bang it and score with speed and power. When we were playing against Logan Tom back when she was at Stanford, I mean, a third of her shots were nothing but off-speed shots that would go down and score, just drive you crazy as the opposing coach. But we have, I've written a paper with my good friend Walt Kerr on the art and science of outside hitting. And so we number the zones, and we really work on teaching the kids on how to hit and score off the outside arm, off the top of the hands, both down zone 1 and then off the high zone 5. And so it's just again, I think it's a real art and science when you're training those outside hitters.
Dave, you're also pretty rare from a standpoint that you like your outside hitters to be able to play 6 rotations, and you want them to be able to ball control. How important? Well, obviously you feel that that's very important. Why do you feel like that's so important to be able to keep them on the court and play 6 rotations?
Well, for as long as I've been here, I think one of the hardest parts about being in our conference is being able to score. And, we haven't had a lot of outside hitters who can just flat out jump people and just hit it so hard that they can just score. And Kim Glass would be one of the few. Maddie Kingdon at the end of her career was certainly like that. Clay Mao. We've had a couple, but in 28 years, having 2 or 3 or 4, is really not that many. So the key component for us in terms of developing a 6 is, and the reason why we want them to be able to serve, receive, and play defense is to be able to score out of the back row. And really, that's been a big part of our offensive system, is just to have a kid who can be a threat to score and be terminal out of the back row.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Dave, you've had the opportunity to train a lot of All-Americans. What do you think it takes to be an All-American, and what are some of the things that those All-Americans that have come out of your program have in common?
Well, I think that everyone's wired a little bit different. I've trained All-Americans who are just get by on talent and just physical talent, and then I've trained All-Americans. I've trained kids who should have been All-Americans, but were not named All-American because of the fact that maybe we didn't go far enough in the tournament. So there's a little bit of a political part of becoming an All-American. But in terms of the traits that I feel like you need to have an All-American, some kids are wired where they're so attention to detail oriented that the way that they apply themselves on each particular contact and throughout practice, in my mind, that determines whether or not how good they're going to be and whether or not they're going to be an All-American. And so in our conference, it's really hard to be an All-American because there's so many great players. I mean, you account for the ones at Stanford and the ones at UCLA and the ones at Washington. I mean, and there's just not a lot of room, for other players outside of the shinier schools, because those schools are going to have, recruit the best players in the country year in and year out. So for me to get 1 or 2 or 3 in a 4-year cycle is actually somewhat rare. They have to be pretty special. We have to go deep in the tournament. But in terms of the qualities that those kids have to have, in my mind, they have to be wired in a way where they are going to work and they're going to have a drive and they're going to pursue excellence every day without excuse, without fault. Every day they show up and they're going to be the best they can. That's a really, really tough skill to have. And that, in the way I define it, is a skill as well.
Sure. So you've been at Arizona now for over 20 years. What are some highlights of the university that student athletes are really drawn to that brings them to Tucson?
Gotcha. I think that's probably a better question for the former athletes, but I think the thing that we sell is our athletic department is terrific because of McHale Center, McHale Arena, all of the 20 sports that we feel that U of A, 18 of them are housed inside McHale. And so the student athletes are so close to one another, proximity. So there's a lot of friendship and a lot of family type settings that you get there. I think Tucson is not for everybody. And I think that, you kind of have to want a smaller kind of a cow town type of feel, but it is a college town. It's over 1 million people here, just about 1 million people here, and no professional sports. And as a result, the community really gets behind the U of A. And so I think the facilities are first rate and are beautiful. But what really sells us is going to be our relationship with those players. Arizona isn't a school name that nationally people are drawn to. It's going to be our ability to create those relationships, try to get them on campus, establish, a real good friendship, and they feel like I'm going to have their best interest at heart.
That makes a lot of sense. I know from at least visiting there, it's a gorgeous campus and somewhere I would have loved to spend 4 years.
It's certainly a fan friendly, and the student body is really loyal to the U of A. If you talk to anyone that went to school at U of A, that 90% of them are going to have some pretty good things to say about it.
That's great. Hey, so last question for you. What are the top 3 things that you look for in an athlete when you're recruiting them?
Well, the thing that I want you to remember for me, and the thing that I've learned as I've gotten older, is that in the earlier days, I would just recruit on talent, really talent alone. And obviously, there's a requisite level of talent that you have to have, certainly in our conference, to be successful. But for me now, it's really important that the number one thing is that I'm going to get a player, I'm going to recruit a player who's got the requisite level of talent, just enough. But it's going to be the intangible sides that she brings to the table that's going to be drawn, that I'm going to be drawn to. The other part of that is that they have to know the kind of coach that I am. I'm not the right coach for everybody, because I am big on accountability, and I'm big on work ethic, and I'm big on players who want to be coached. And I'm big on players who understand the process of improvement. And some players aren't like that, don't want that. And even though they say they want that, once we get in the gym, it's hard for them to want to be held. They don't like being held accountable. They want to be good immediately, so they don't understand the process and have the growth mindset. And so it's really important that I'm trying to find players who understand that process and are willing to work. The work ethic part is a big deal, but what is just as big now for me is they're willing to be coached, they understand the process, and they understand the type of person that I am, what my expectations are. And so it's not about winning for me. To me, it's about taking a player, once you get into my program, and I'm going to make you and help you get to the point where you're the best that you can be after your 4th year, whether that's academically, whether that's from a volleyball player. Some players just are unwilling to work hard enough to get to where I think they can be. They sell themselves short, and they're unwilling to work hard enough to get where I think they can be. And those are the players that I really struggle with. And so I've been very, very careful, to try to find those kind of players who I think are good fits for me. So just because a kid is really, really talented doesn't mean that they're really talented and they're the right fit for me.
That makes a lot of sense. Dave Rubio, head coach from University of Arizona, thank you very much for taking the time with us today.
Adam, a pleasure as always, and best of luck to you and your family.
Thanks, buddy.